Hey everybody, this is Mr. Storm, and in this video we're going to talk about HTML tables and HTML forms. They kind of feel the same, and so that's why I group them together in the same lesson, because they do kind of, well, they don't do the same thing, but they look the same and they're implemented almost the same way in HTML. So let's talk about tables first. What is a table? Well, a table is something that looks like this, right? It is essentially just an intersection, or it's a piece of data. It's a data storage object that has columns, which are up and down, and they have rows, which are left and right. And the intersection of a column and a row is a cell in which you can put data. Mostly, you've probably seen tables in Microsoft Word documents. You can add a table. You can add a table to a PowerPoint presentation, stuff like that. In this video, we're going to learn how to add a table to an HTML page. It's actually easier than you might be thinking. So the first thing we have to do is we have to define the table. We have to say we're going to use a table. That is done by creating a table open tag, right? So this table open tag will create a table on our screen. And then we want to indicate every row that is going to be in our table. That's going to be done with a table row tag. And then within each row, we can add either table headers or table data. Table headers, by default, will center your text and bold them. Usually this is used at the top row, on the top row of a table, to kind of indicate, what type of data goes in that column. Table data elements, however, are left justified, meaning they go to the left of the cell, and they're not bolded. So here's an example of what this would look like. So we have table. Now, they're indicating style width equals 100%. That's just because they want the table to stretch across the entire screen. And then inside the table, we have a number of table rows. We have one row here, we have a second row here, and we have a third row here. Inside the row, we have a header. So we have one header, two headers, and three headers. So this is a 3-row table and 3-column table. So this is a 3x3 table. The reason I know it's a 3-column table is because there are 3 either table headers or table data in the first row. The first row will indicate how many columns you have in your table. I know that there are 3 rows because there are 3 TR elements inside of this table. Okay? Let's take a look at what this table looks like. So this is what the table will look like if we wrote it exactly like this. I'm going to get rid of the style here and run it again and just show you kind of what it looks like there. So here's how this is working. The table itself has the rows inside of it. The first row is this information right here. First name, last name, age. That's the first row. Now, this may seem confusing because these are stacked vertically, yet over here, they're horizontal. So it might be easier to think about it like this. Remember, HTML editors don't care about white space, so we can put these elements like this and it won't be confusing for our compiler. So in this way, we can see it. It's actually pretty easy to see what's happening here. Each of these items are just a table header element with some information inside. Now the next row is essentially the information that goes under each of these headers, right? So, and if we do this, it becomes a little easier to see. And I'm actually going to space this out so you can see that this data goes under this table header, and that data goes under that table header. So that's what we're looking at right there, right? And then so on and so forth. This is pretty... Oh, did I say there were 3 rows? It looks like there are 4 rows in here. That's fine. But hopefully you understand what this is. Hopefully you understand what we're doing. We're creating a table. Then we're saying, I want a row in that table. And in that row, I want 1, 2, 3, 4. I want a certain amount of columns in that row. And this is the data that I want to go inside each of those cells on the first row. And then we're just doing that row by row. Okay. Now this doesn't look great. There are some ways we can style our table to make it look a little better. For example, we can add a border, which looks pretty good. Now, the way you're going to add a border is, I'm going to get rid of the styled out width one more time. Okay, so the way you add a border is with something called CSS, or Cascading Style Sheets code. Our entire second term is going to be focused on learning CSS. But for our purposes today, if you just want to add a border around your table so it's a bit more distinct and you can see it a little easier, what you're going to do is inside the head section of your program, you're going to put this code here. You're going to start a style element. You're going to have an end tag for your style element. And inside the style element, you're going to paste this code exactly the way it's written here. If you don't do exactly what's written here, it may not look the way you want it to. So, and again, I'm not going to explain exactly what this means because this is something we're going to learn next term. But if you want your border, if you want a border around your table elements, then this is how you would do it. All right. You can also collapse your border as well. So if you want the border to just be a single line, you can add a border collapse statement within that last. So you can copy this code instead of the last code I showed you. Cell padding. Padding is going to add some room between your content and the lines. So this is what a table with padding looks like. And again, if you want to create a table that looks like this is what your style section should look like. Left align headings, add border spacing. So there's all kinds of stuff that we can do with tables, but honestly, that's really what you need to pay attention to for this assignment. I'm asking you to create a table that has your bell schedule in it. And I will show you how to do that whenever we get into the assignment. Okay, let's talk about forms. Now, forms are kind of a big subject. And forms are something that we're going to touch on just lightly, but we're not going to spend too much time with forms. The reason why is because forms become very powerful once you start learning JavaScript, which is a client-side programming language, but they become incredibly powerful when you learn server-side languages like PHP, so that you can pull information from your user and then do something with that information on the server side. We're going to do some forms work in WebDev. Well, not WebDev 2. You won't really get into JavaScript until HTML5 applications development. We'll be using a lot of forms in that class. For this course, however, all I need to do is see that you can write the HTML code to build a form. So here's what I mean by a form. A form is essentially just a place where users can enter some input and hit a button, and then that input is sent to you, the web host or whatever, right? Now, for all of our, oh, hello. I thought that wasn't going to do anything. Anyway, for all of our projects, we'll have a button on them on the forms, but they're not going to go anywhere. They're not going to do anything. They're going to be dead buttons. So here's how it looks. First, you create a form open tag, right? And then this action equals action page.php. This is the action that's going to be performed once this form is submitted. We actually don't need this, and I'm not even going to teach you what that means. We can get rid of that because, again, our forms will be dead. Then on the inside, we have some of these elements that are pretty important. Notice that we have a label element. That label is basically just text inside of our form. We have this for attribute, for equals fname. Fname is going to be the text entry box directly below it. Then we have the actual label that's going to be applied, which is first name. Then we've closed off our label with a label close tag. And then we have BR. BR is a break. It means go to the next line. Okay. Then we have this input, and the type attribute is going to indicate what type of input it is. For example, this input is a text type, meaning you can type text into this input box. We're giving it the ID of fname. We're giving it a name of fname. And we're giving it a value of John. The value is just going to pre-fill this form for us. Now the ID and name, my dog's barking. The ID and name are not necessarily important for our purposes, but they're extremely important if you are actually trying to capture this data somehow and then use it to either, log someone into their account or do a search on a database, that kind of stuff. All right. Let's see. So text fields, label element. Let's talk about some of the form elements that we're going to see. So we have the input element, label, select, text area, button, field set, legend, data list, output, option, opt, group, all that stuff. The input element is going to create some way for your user to input information into the web page, whether it's by text or by selecting some options, that kind of stuff. The label is, like I said before, it's really just a text that you can put on the screen. The select element. The select element creates a drop-down list for your users to pick through, right? So the way this works is you start it with select, and then you give it an ID and a name. And then inside of the select, you have options. These options basically make up the options that are available to you when you click the drop-down menu. All right, multiple selections. We also have text area. Text area looks like this. It basically gives you a larger area to type your text into. Also, you want a button at the bottom of your form. You always want buttons on your form because they've got to be able to click something to submit what they're typing. That looks good. We don't really need to get into that. Data list. Let's see. Oh, the data list. Okay, data list is kind of cool. It allows you to either type. Hold on a second. Firefox. It allows you to type, but it also functions as a drop-down menu as well. So those are kind of cool. You might want to play around with those a bit. The output element. So the output element, this is going to require some programming, a little bit of math maybe. So on input, x equals value equals, you know what, this is too much. We're going to get into this in not Web Dev 2, but HTML5 apps development. We'll get into that later. But just know that it is possible to make like sliders and stuff in your HTML forms. Okay, let's talk about some of the other input types that you might see. So input is going to be most of the things you're going to put on your screen are inputs. So the text input is something that we've already played with. You can actually create a password input where whenever you're typing, it's not going to, there it goes. It was just taking forever. It actually types in your text as dots. Let's see, we have our submit button. We have reset, which will clear out the fields. Radio buttons are interesting. Okay, they're these button sets, and only one of them can be clicked at a time, right? So they're pretty interesting. Now with radio buttons, they work pretty easily, honestly. You basically just indicate that it's an input of type radio with an ID of whatever the option is going to be, right? The name of the general set of buttons that you're putting together, then a value of whatever it is that you're going to have as the value of that button. Then you have a label that essentially is for mail, the mail ID. So if you just kind of look at what we're doing here, it's pretty easy to see. We have our circle here, and then we have the label next to it. And because these are all tied to the same name, then my browser knows that if I have one of these selected, I can't select the others. And if I do select the others, it unselects the one that I had chosen. So these are pretty easy. They're pretty versatile also. Probably you're going to see these a lot, actually. Something else you're going to see a lot is checkbox. So checkbox is kind of the same as a radio button, except you can choose as many or as few of these as you want. So checkbox work almost the same way. Input type equal checkbox, ID vehicle, name vehicle, value bike. And then each of these have separate names and separate values. Pretty easy stuff. Input type color. Oh, this is really cool. Watch what happens when you use an input type color. So it gives you this color menu, and you can actually select the color you're trying to submit. This is pretty cool. This is pretty cool. Date. There's a date input type, which gives you this calendar that you can go through. Date is fantastic. Date time local, which will allow you to put in date and time. Input type email. This will allow you to format your email properly. Pretty good stuff. File. This will allow you to choose a file and upload a file to your website. Month input type is kind of like date, but it just allows you to choose the month and the year. Let's see, number. You can actually increase or decrease the number, and you can set a range as well. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Let's see. So yeah, there's all kinds of cool stuff that you can use. Tons of cool input types that you can use. URL, time's cool, right? So play around with these. Just, kind of add a couple to your form and see how it looks, see how it works. Week is cool. Oh, look at that. That's pretty sweet. Yeah, so just add a couple of these to your form and play around with them. All right. And now attributes. So these I'm not really going to talk about too much just because the lecture's getting kind of long. And I want you guys to be able to read through this stuff and kind of figure out for yourself which of these you want to use. These attributes will change the behavior of your form items. For example, read only specifies that an input field is read only, meaning that you can't really click on it or do anything. Like down here you can change it, but up here you can't, right? So read only is important. Disabled will turn off something. You can change the size, max length, all this stuff. So these are all attributes that you can use on these input types and elements. I'm going to let you just pick and choose which of these you want to try. All right, that's it for tables and forms. Again, these two concepts are pretty closely related, and if you can understand how to add these, I promise you, next week when we get into media, you're going to realize that this is literally what we're doing this week is the most difficult, and if you understand this stuff, then you'll be totally fine, because after this, the difficulty really just drops off a hill. It just drops right off a cliff. All right, I'm going to let you get started with the quiz, and then after that, you're going to add a table and a form to your web page. Okay, see you then. Peace.